The film commences with a woman named Melanie, who is desperately fleeing through an underground tunnel from an unseen creature. After several frantic attempts, she manages to claw her way to the surface, gasping in relief. However, her sense of safety is short-lived.
I can't die again.
Can't do it.
No, please!
The scene transitions to a group of friends, Clover, her ex-boyfriend Max, Megan, and a couple named Nina and Abe, who are driving along a desolate road. Later, the group watches a video message from Melanie, revealing that she is Clover's sister. In the message, Melanie expresses her remorse for struggling to cope with their mother's death and for abandoning the family home. It becomes evident that the group is at the same gas station where they have been searching for Melanie, who has been missing for a year. Subsequently, Clover enters the store and shows the owner a photo of her sister, inquiring if he has seen her. The owner informs her that Melanie is not the first person to come looking for missing loved ones, noting that many individuals have vanished in a nearby town called Glore Valley. Upon hearing this information, Clover feels a renewed sense of hope and suggests to her friends that she may have an idea of Melanie's whereabouts. The group then sets off toward Glore Valley amidst a heavy rainstorm. However, they soon realize they are completely lost, driving in circles without finding a clear route. They eventually stop in front of a visitor center, where they are unsettled by a dark cloud hovering above it. Despite the raging storm around them, the building appears eerily dry and untouched. With no cell service available, Megan, who claims to be a psychic, expresses her feelings of foreboding. Meanwhile, Abe, Nina, and Megan venture inside the seemingly abandoned house and discover a suspicious hourglass. While exploring further, Nina finds a guest registry book, and Abe is disturbed to see a wall filled with posters of missing persons. Outside, Clover suddenly hears her sister calling her name and spots a figure in the distance. She moves toward the storm, followed closely by Max, but soon becomes disoriented in the rain while Max desperately calls out to her. Inside the visitor center, Nina records her name in the guest registry while Abe is taken aback upon discovering Melanie's missing poster among the others. Moments later, Max catches up to Clover and pulls her back from the rain before they both enter the visitor center. Once reunited with their friends, they share their unsettling experiences, but Clover remains optimistic, insisting that she heard Melanie calling through the storm. At that moment, Nina notices that the hourglass in the room has inexplicably flipped over, despite no one recalling having touched it. The group then hears strange noises echoing from a distance and rushes outside to find that their truck has been inexplicably moved to the rainy side of the area. The narrative progresses as the group suspects that someone may be attempting to steal their vehicle. Alarmed by this possibility, Abe and Nina decide to keep watch over the truck while the others search for a phone. They eventually make their way to the basement, where Max is taken aback to find an underground window. Clover discovers an old phone, but unfortunately, it is inoperable. They also locate a radio and attempt to reach out for help, but their efforts prove fruitless. Meanwhile, upstairs, Nina and Abe hear a noise emanating from a nearby room. Abe decides to investigate alone but does not return after some time. Concerned by the sound, Nina ventures into the room only to encounter a horrifying sight. Hearing Nina scream, Max looks toward the basement door and is horrified to see Nina's lifeless body with the killer standing over her. Realizing he has been spotted, Max flees and urgently instructs the girls to hide. Shortly thereafter, the killer descends into the basement. Max seizes a chair and attempts to strike the assailant. But his efforts have little effect. In a brutal turn of events, the killer stabs Max in the eye, resulting in his immediate demise. Meanwhile, Clover and Megan witness these horrific events from their hiding spot, tears streaming down their faces. As the killer approaches their location, Clover stealthily retrieves a knife from a nearby table. Unfortunately, the killer soon discovers Megan hiding in a closet, dragging her out and savagely beating her to death. In a desperate act, Clover plunges the knife into the killer's back. However, it proves ineffective, prompting her to flee. She is later seen running into the woods but suddenly freezes upon spotting a figure resembling her sister. Just then, the killer fatally strikes her from behind with a scythe. The film takes a chilling turn as the hourglass reverses and everything resets. The group members find themselves inexplicably alive and back at the beginning of the night before the horror unfolded. Confusion and dread envelop them as they attempt to comprehend what has transpired. To compound their distress, Abe reveals that their faces have now been added to the wall of missing posters. As the group debates their chances of escape, Megan begins to feel unwell, asserting that this night is even worse than before. Suddenly, her body convulses, and she emits a piercing scream that shatters every light in the house. The group scrambles for their flashlights only to realize that Megan has mysteriously vanished. Moments later, Clover hears a faint sound and leads the group to the room filled with missing posters. They discover Megan there, floating in a trance-like state and muttering incomprehensible phrases. She begins pointing at each poster while speaking in various voices.
Where's my mom? Mommy? Mom! Has anyone seen Tommy? My hair?
Leading the group to conclude that she has become a vessel for the missing souls pleading for help through her. Tragically, Megan violently snaps her neck and collapses lifelessly. The terrified group frantically discusses their next move when a loud banging reverberates at the front door. Abe cautiously peeks outside but sees no one. However, Melanie's voice calls from beyond the door, demanding entry. This prompts Clover to panic, and despite her friend's desperate warnings to refrain from opening it, she ultimately does so. To their shock, no one is outside. Instead, an unfamiliar house stands before them. Suddenly, Clover is propelled into the air by an unseen force while her friends remain trapped inside the visitor center. She is gradually dragged toward the new house and then violently pulled inside as the door slams shut behind her. Concerned for Clover's safety, Max attempts to pursue her but is restrained by the others who deem it too dangerous. Frustrated, Max curses his friends and storms out alone. Meanwhile, Clover regains consciousness in a dimly lit room surrounded by eerie mannequins adorned with grotesque masks. As she surveys her surroundings, she spots an elderly woman connected to an oxygen mask, sitting silently in front of a TV. When Clover tries to leave, the woman, in a sinister voice, says, "There's only one way out, you either survive the night or become part of it." The character reveals herself to be a witch, suddenly compelling Clover to breathe through her mask. As the witch begins to disintegrate, Clover starts to experience possession. Shortly thereafter, Max arrives at the house while Abe and Nina hastily enter their truck. Nina expresses her anxiety about leaving their friends behind, but Abe dismisses her concerns, locking the doors and driving into the rain. Their progress is abruptly halted when a massive creature blocks their path, forcing them to retreat. In a state of panic, Nina attempts to open her door but freezes in horror upon discovering that her boyfriend has been killed. It is at this moment that the masked man reappears. Meanwhile, Max is frantically searching for Clover and finds himself in a room filled with unsettling dolls. The possessed Clover then makes her way toward the visitor center, but tragically, she is struck and killed by the masked killer driving the truck. The narrative resets once again, leading the group to question whether this cycle will continue. They barricade the front door and lock themselves in the bathroom, hoping to survive until dawn. Abe drinks from the sink's tap water and offers it to the others, who gratefully accept, completely exhausted from the unfolding nightmare. Clover shares what the witch had told her, at which point Abe begins coughing up blood and attempts to conceal it. However, his coughing escalates uncontrollably until, in a shocking twist, his body violently explodes, showering everyone with blood. A terrified Nina rushes to the sink, but Megan warns her against drinking the water. Unfortunately, it is too late, and Nina explodes. In shock, the remaining survivors flee the bathroom, but it is not long before Megan violently bursts as well. Witnessing this horrifying scene, a trembling Clover pleads with Max to end her life in order to restart the loop and devise a new plan. However, Max finds himself unable to follow through with her request. Clover collapses to the ground, gasping for breath, when a man approaches while whistling ominously. She recognizes him as the same gas station attendant and hears him say that she almost made it, but she cannot survive by remaining passive. At this moment, Clover also explodes, just before the hourglass is flipped over. In the subsequent loop, Megan experiences rapid hair loss and realizes that she is developing extra teeth. This time, the group decides to investigate the history of Glore Valley and begins sifting through old files in the basement. They are astonished to discover that the gas attendant is, in fact, a doctor named Alan Hill. They learn that 20 years prior, a catastrophic mine collapse claimed the lives of over 1,100 individuals in the area. The miners had excavated too deeply, unleashing devastation that caused much of the town to be consumed by the earth. Dr. Hill, a specialist in trauma recovery, was brought in by the state to assist the surviving residents. This revelation sheds light on the peculiar architecture of the visitor center, which features windows positioned oddly below ground level. At this juncture, Nina spots a door in the basement and speculates that it may provide an escape route. However, upon seeing its dark tunnel, she becomes frightened and closes it. The group subsequently plays a VHS tape they discovered, featuring a man locked in a room, crying out in pain and unable to comprehend why he keeps returning to life. Dr. Hill narrates that he is conducting experiments on the fragile mental and emotional states of disaster survivors. He notes that the patient exhibits alarming signs of starvation and muscle atrophy, but most disturbingly suffers from overwhelming fear and anxiety, coupled with feelings of hopelessness. After 13 days of entrapment, the victim begins transforming into a monstrous creature known as a Wendigo, characterized by insatiable hunger. At this moment, Dr. Hill connects with the group via radio and states, "Now you're getting it." An undeterred Clover demands that he let them go. Dr. Hill discloses that one individual must die for the remaining 4 to escape without complications. However, Clover steadfastly refuses to sacrifice anyone and insists on meeting Hill in person. The deranged doctor consents, stating that he is in the woods with Melanie and that only Clover is permitted to come, excluding her friends. Despite their attempts to dissuade her, Abe supports Clover's decision, leading her to leave the group. Following her departure, the others accuse Abe of selfishness for allowing Clover to go alone. Max proposes that they either find her or take their own lives to restart the cycle, but Abe counters this suggestion. He reminds them that Clover has attempted suicide twice within the past year, implying that her death would not significantly impact the situation. Enraged by this, Nina stabs Abe with a pickaxe in retaliation and orders Max and Megan to pursue Clover. Meanwhile, Clover finds herself in the woods when she unexpectedly falls into a concealed trap. M8 chain snaps around her leg, yanking her off the ground and dragging her deeper into the forest. Back at the visitor center, Nina and Abe engage in an emotional discussion about their grim predicament, but their conversation is abruptly interrupted. In another scene, Max and Megan attempt to track Clover through the dense woods when they are confronted by a lurking Wendigo. They flee in terror, but Megan stumbles and crashes onto the glass roof of a buried house. As the fragile surface begins to crack, Max rushes to assist her, only for the Wendigo to reappear. The glass ultimately gives way, sending both Max and Megan plummeting below, where the Wendigo drags Megan into the basement. Eventually, Max reunites with Clover and helps her escape from the trap. However, they are soon attacked by a Wendigo that is revealed to be Melanie. The pair runs away and hides, where an emotional Clover expresses her regret and hands Max a shard of glass, urging him to kill her. Reluctantly, he slits her throat and subsequently drinks from the contaminated water. Shortly thereafter, Wendigo Melanie appears. However, before she can attack Max, he explodes in front of her. In the next loop, conditions worsen as deformities begin to manifest on Abe's body, indicating the onset of his transformation into a Wendigo. Clover then inquires about how many nights have passed, and Nina unexpectedly reveals that it is the 13th night according to the registry book. Alarmingly, no one has ever survived beyond 13 nights. The group then glances out the window and observes an entire cluster of houses that have inexplicably appeared around them. They soon realize that Megan is missing and urgently check Abe's phone, which has been recording their experiences. Each video chillingly documents how the group met their demise, from attacks by flesh-eating maggots to encounters with Wendigos and the mysterious masked man. One recording shows Dr. Hill inspecting bodies before exiting the room. The final video was filmed by Megan, who had been secretly tracking Hill in hopes of finding a way to escape the cursed location. At this moment, they hear the sound of an air raid siren. Upon peering outside, they see several Wendigos approaching. In a state of panic, the group decides to navigate through the dark pathway leading from their basement in search of Megan. After arming themselves, they cautiously proceed through the dim tunnel. During their escape, the group encounters a horde of Wendigos. After a frantic pursuit, they manage to evade the creatures unscathed and find themselves in a buried house from an old town. Unfortunately, a masked assailant appears and attacks them. Max urges Clover to flee while they confront the attacker. Clover agrees to leave, but as she walks away, she encounters the Wendigo version of her sister, Melanie. Realizing that this creature is no longer her sister, Clover pushes her onto a nearby iron object, resulting in her immediate death. Before departing, Clover expresses her love for Melanie. Meanwhile, Max, Abe, and Nina successfully overpower the masked man, ultimately crushing his head with a sledgehammer. As Clover continues her journey, she arrives at a sanatorium where she discovers Megan trapped in a room with a chained Wendigo. The room is locked, prompting Clover to search for the key. During her search, she stumbles upon Dr. Hill's office, which is filled with surveillance cameras. At that moment, Dr. Hill enters, sipping coffee and placing his mug on the table. He informs Clover that she has been one of his most intriguing patients, suffering from severe depression and extreme anxiety, having attempted suicide twice. Dr. Hill shockingly reveals that the monsters pursuing her friends each night are manifestations of Clover's own fears. He cryptically explains that the masked killer represents a common fear, while the exploding water symbolizes her self-destructive tendencies. As he continues to elaborate on his experiments, Clover notices a leaking tap with contaminated water and strategically positions his coffee table beneath it.
Trauma becomes terror.
Unbeknownst to Dr. Hill, he drinks the tainted coffee and soon begins to feel ill. Seizing the opportunity, Clover quickly takes his keys and rushes to free Megan from her confinement. The two girls attempt to escape but are pursued by several Wendigos as time runs out on the hourglass. In a desperate bid for freedom, they dig their way to the surface, mirroring Melanie's actions at the film's outset. Fortunately, their friends are waiting above and assist them just as the hourglass runs out, signaling the end of the cursed night. As dawn breaks, they collapse onto the grass, still shaken but relieved. They then climb into Abe's truck and drive away from the haunted valley, marking the conclusion of the film.